You know, the story of Job is one of the most powerful explorations of suffering ever told. It's a timeless classic. But today, we're not actually going to focus on Job. We're going to zoom in on one of the story's most overlooked and, frankly, most hated characters, his wife. Just 4 words. In most translations, that's all she gets to say. And wow, they might just be the most shocking words spoken by any woman in the entire Bible. For centuries, these 4 words have been her entire legacy. And the traditional take is pretty straightforward, right? She's the faithless wife, the nagging spouse, maybe a final desperate temptation sent to break her righteous husband after everything else failed. She's seen as the last straw. But what if that's not the whole story? What if we've had it wrong all this time? What if, buried behind these 4 infamous words, there's a deep story about translation, unimaginable grief, and ultimately, faithfulness? Okay, let's really dive into this. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to go back to the source, the original Hebrew text. And when we do that, we find a major puzzle right away. So this is where it gets really interesting. What we read in English as curse comes from the Hebrew word barak. And barak, in just about every other context, means the exact opposite. It means to bless. The original text literally has her saying, "Bless God and die." Which, of course, raises a huge question. How on earth does bless become curse? And what does that tell us about the woman who said it? Well, the leading theory is something called a scribal euphemism. You have to imagine these ancient scribes. They were incredibly devout. And the very idea of writing the word curse right next to the name of God was just unthinkable. It was blasphemy. So to avoid writing something so offensive, they'd substitute it with its polar opposite. And we know this wasn't just some random mistake, because the exact same switch-up happens earlier in the story. When Satan first challenges God, he says Job will surely curse you. And guess what word he uses in the Hebrew? You got it, barak, bless. So it's a clear pattern. Okay, so if her words are way more complicated than they seem, maybe her character is too. Let's actually build a case for her faithfulness, because the rest of the story paints a very different picture of who this woman was. Let's just look at the facts from the text. Job is called the most righteous man on earth. Does it really track that he'd be married to a wicked woman? And they raised 10 kids together. But the biggest piece of evidence is what happens after the tragedy. She doesn't leave. She stays by his side, and they go on to have 10 more children and rebuild their entire life. That is a pattern of faithfulness, not faithlessness. You know, some people argue that Satan was playing 4D chess and he kept her alive just to torment Job. But the text doesn't really portray Satan as this master strategist. He's more arrogant, more short-sighted. It seems way more plausible that he just saw a woman absolutely drowning in grief and saw a moment of weakness, a target of opportunity. So if she wasn't a villain, then we have to look at her words differently. What if they aren't a failure of faith at all? What if there's something deeply, painfully human? What if they're a cry of unbearable grief? We gloss over this so often. Everything Job lost, she lost too. She's not some side character in his suffering. She was a mother who had just been told that all 10 of her children, the ones she carried, the ones she raised, were gone, all at once.
The author David Bannon, who is himself a bereaved parent, puts it perfectly. He says he totally relates to her. He doesn't see a lack of faith. He sees the raw, protective, furious pain of a parent dealing with an insane injustice. It's a feeling that's as real today as it was thousands of years ago.
And to put the stress she was under into perspective, look at this number. Modern studies have found that among parents who lose a child, the divorce rate can be as high as 90%. The grief is just so immense, it often shatters even the strongest relationships. And that reframes everything, doesn't it? Her words aren't a sign that she stopped believing in God. They're a sign she was absolutely furious with the God she still believed in. It's not a loss of faith. It's a crisis of faith. It's that desperate, agonizing cry of, why? And we have to remember, Job himself hits this exact same breaking point. Just 1 chapter later, he's cursing the very day he was born, wishing he'd never existed. They were both just completely consumed by a despair that's almost impossible for us to imagine. So what do we do with all this? When we look past that single dark moment, how should we see her in the end? even Job's response to her is more nuanced than it seems. He doesn't say, "You are a fool." He says, "You speak as one of the foolish women." It's a subtle but crucial difference. It's a strong rebuke for sure, but it also feels like a loving correction, like he's trying to pull his wife back from the edge by reminding her of the faith they built their life on. When you put all the pieces together, a completely new portrait emerges. Not of a villain, but of a godly woman, a loving wife and mother who showed a lifetime of faithfulness, who, on the single worst day of her life, buckled under an impossible weight. And then, somehow, she found her way back. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? Her story forces us to ask a question not just about her, but about ourselves. Are any of us truly defined by our single worst moment? Or is there always room for a bigger story, one of grief, failure, and maybe, just maybe, grace?